computer. All right, I think we are good to go. Oh, who do we got there from God on Me? Who is there? Okay, terrific. All right, we are gonna get going. Welcome everybody, happy Sukkot. I am going to share my screen and we will get started. Glad you can all be here with me in my sukkah. All right, just because we have a lot to get through, I think I'm not going to stop to everybody introduce themselves right now, but I'm going to ask people to take turns reading, and when you read, you can take a minute to introduce yourself and say where you work. Does that sound good? Yes? Good. Okay. So we have a lot to talk about because we're going to talk about a bunch of different holidays that all happen in this 8-day period, Sukkot and Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah and a little bit other stuff. So we'll see how much we are able to get through. But whatever we do, we'll be good. I wanted to start with a calendar just to see where we're at. A reminder that the Jewish calendar is based on the moon and the secular calendar is based on the sun, which is why it looks like the Jewish holidays hop around everywhere every year. In reality, the Jewish holidays fall on the same dates every year on the Jewish calendar. It's such the Jewish calendar and the secular calendar don't match up. So this year, Sukkot began on Saturday, the 3rd of October. It started Friday night, actually, which is the 2nd of October. And it goes all the way through the 9th of October, which is this Friday. Friday is also a holiday called Hoshana Rabbah, which is a very well-kept secret, very not well-known. So we'll talk a little bit about Hoshana Rabbah. And immediately after Sukkot, we have these 2 more days of holidays called Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah. Some people observe those 2 as one day, and we'll talk more about that. But this is kind of how the calendar falls out. And after October 11th, we're done with Jewish holidays all the way up till Hanukkah. In the next month, in Cheshvan, the next Jewish month, there are no holidays at all. And some people call it Mar Cheshvan, the bitter month of Cheshvan, because it's bereft of holidays after all the holidays in Tishrei. So right now, on Wednesday the 7th, we're right in the middle of Sukkot. During these days, we call Chol HaMoed, which means the ordinary amongst the holiday, because it's still a holiday, but they're still regular work days. And we will talk all more about that, but are there any questions about the calendar before we go on? Okay, then we will go on. All right, so like many Jewish holidays, there are 4 names for this holiday that we're celebrating right now. Before I tell you all of them, does anybody know another name for the holiday besides Sukkot? Go ahead and unmute yourself and jump in. Lisa?
The Festival of Booths.
The Festival of Booths, which is a translation of Chag HaSukkot. Excellent.
The Festival of the Tabernacle.
Absolutely, and I think that's another translation in English. Tabernacle and booths, I think, means the same thing, but absolutely. Is the wind making too much noise? Oh, okay, good, all right. So there are 4 names. So the first one is what both Roger and Lisa were talking about, Chag HaSukkot, which is sometimes translated as Festival of the Booths, sometimes as Festival of the Tabernacles. I have no clue what tabernacle actually means in English, but I guess it means booths. It is also called Chag HaAsif, which means the holiday of gathering, because it's talking about being a harvest festival and we're gathering in all the different produce that comes in. It is called Hechag, the holiday, which shows you how very, very central this holiday is. So much attention is given in Judaism to the high holidays, right? To Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, to Hanukkah, to Passover. And I think Sukkot sometimes gets forgotten, but it is just such a wonderful, joyous, fun holiday. And so important that the rabbis referred to it as the holiday, Hechag. And finally is called Zman Simchatenu. And in the prayer book, that's what we say all over and over again, which means the holiday of our joy, the time of our joy. So all 4 of these tell us something about the holiday, right? That we spend time in booths outside, that we gather in the harvest, that it's so prominent that it's the holiday, and that it's a joyous time. So that gets us started.
I've got the definition for tabernacle.
Oh, what does it say for tabernacle?
So it says, this is the English definition. It says a fixed or movable habitation, typically of light construction, and or a meeting place for worship used by some Protestants or Mormons.
There we go. Thank you.
There we go.
Lisa, that's
from the Oxford Dictionary.
Excellent. So I've tried to put in here some different pictures of Sukkot in different places because every sukkah looks different. That one you saw on the page before was my own sukkah last year. This is from Israel, where you see lots of them in a row, but we'll see lots more pictures. All right, so here are some Torah texts, some biblical texts about Sukkot, because I always like to start that. Do I have a volunteer who would like to read?
I'll begin.
Louise? Go ahead, Louise, and introduce yourself, and then you can read.
Okay. Hi, hi everyone. I know some of you. I'm Louise Jesse, and you can tell from the back. I work with Zippy at the Federation in planning and allocations. Leviticus. On the 15th day of the 7th month, when you have gathered in the fruits of the land, you shall celebrate Sukkot for 7 days. The first day shall be a sacred day of rest, and the 8th day shall be a sacred day of rest. And you shall take for yourself on the first day the fruit of a beautiful tree, fronds of a palm tree, plaited twigs of thick trees, and willows of the brook, and you shall rejoice before the Lord your God 7 days. And you shall observe the festival of God for 7 days in the year. It is a statute for all time in your generations. You shall keep it in the 7th month. You shall dwell in Sukkot for 7 days. All citizens of Israel shall dwell in Sukkot, in order that your generation shall know that I made the children of Israel to dwell in Sukkot when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God, and Moses transmitted to the children of Israel the appointed seasons of the Lord.
Wonderful. All right, we learn a lot about Sukkot in this text. Who can tell me something about Sukkot we learned from this text? Anybody can unmute yourself and jump in.
You heard about the lulav.
Good. Okay, so it talks about gathering together these 4 species, right? And it doesn't say just the word lulav. It talks about all the different things, right? It talks about the fronds of a palm tree, the plaited twigs of thick trees, willows of the brook, fruit of a beautiful tree. So we're going to talk about what all of those are. Excellent. Thank you, Marilyn. What else?
Lasts for 7 days.
Lasts for 7 days. Excellent. Good. What else do we learn?
It starts on the 15th day of the 7th month, which could be confusing because we often think of Tishri as the first month.
Excellent. Terrific. Do you remember, Roger, what the first month is? Or anybody?
It is Nisan.
Nisan. So the first month of the year is Nisan, but Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the year, is in Tishrei, so very confusing, but it's the 15th day. So basically, since the first Tishrei, 15 days straight, we've been doing holidays, and now another, actually 9. Terrific. Anything else we find out from here?
Dwelling in a sukkah.
So we spend time, we dwell in a sukkah, okay? Dwell in a sukkah for the entire time. Excellent. So tell us why we dwell in the sukkah.
Citizens.
What, Aviva?
I was saying it says all citizens of Israel.
Good.
It doesn't
So
say
it's
the Jewish people, it just says all citizens of Israel.
Good. And it's for everybody, right? It's not just for the rabbis or the scholars or the wealthy. It's for everybody. Excellent.
We dwell in the sukkah because we are reliving the experience of our ancestors on the Exodus.
Good. So while they were leaving, after they left Egypt, when they were in the desert for 40 years, they had to live in temporary dwellings. And so now we're re-experiencing that by living in temporary dwellings. Anything else we learned from this text? There's a lot here.
Also, it says the festival of God.
It's a festival of God. Excellent. Yep.
That you're supposed to rest on the first day and the last day.
Good. The beginning and the end are days of rest, much like Shabbat. All right. You guys are great. I think we got a lot out of that text. All right. Terrific. Would somebody like to read us this one from Deuteronomy? Lisa, go ahead and introduce yourself and read it.
Hi, I'm Lisa Vondra. I work at Sinai and I teach the little guys, kindergarten and first grade. Is that all you wanted? Okay. Deuteronomy. After the ingathering from your threshing floor and your vat, you shall hold the Feast of Booths for 7 days. You shall rejoice in your festival with your son and daughter, your male and female servant, the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow in your communities.
So what does this add to our knowledge of Sukkot that we didn't have from the last verses?
Yeah, you should invite guests to your Sukkah.
Good. It's for everybody, even your servants, right? The stranger, the fatherless, whoever doesn't have a place to go, they all should be celebrating together. This is not an exclusive holiday. Excellent. All right, who would like to read us this text from the Mishnah?
I will.
Go ahead, introduce yourself first.
Although it is a mitzvah to rejoice. Oh, sorry. I'm Aviva Bergstrom. I teach 6th grade at Shalom. I also teach K-4 in the Milwaukee Public School System. So although it is a mitzvah to rejoice on all festivals, on the Sukkot holiday there was a time of overabundant joy in the Holy Temple. For it is written, you shall rejoice before the Lord your God for 7 days. And how was this done? On the eve of the first holiday, they would arrange in the Holy Temple a place for the women above and for the men below, so that they might not mix one with the other. And they began to rejoice from the night after the first holiday and continued on each and every day of the days of the holiday. They began after the Tamid offering was made in the evening to rejoice unto the rest of the day and through the night.
So what do we learn about Sukkot from this text?
A lot of rejoicing.
A lot of rejoicing. There are lots of Jewish holidays that are happy and that we celebrate, but this is the only one where the rabbis actually, where God actually in the Torah commands us to be happy, to rejoice. It is a very, very happy, joyful time. Excellent. All right, so that's our text. Now we're going to get into some stuff about the meaning of Sukkot. All right, so why Sukkot? Here we go. Who would like to read this?
I will. It's Marilyn. Marilyn Franklin. I teach at Shalom, 2nd grade. Sukkot is arguably the happiest holiday on the Jewish calendar. In fact, on Sukkot, we are commanded to rejoice. It comes just 5 days after Yom Kippur, when we have been forgiven for our sins. So we enter this holiday full of joy and with a clean slate. Sukkot is part of the fall holiday season. In fact, it is customary that the first thing one does after the end of Yom Kippur is to start building a sukkah. The sages taught, one who did not see the celebration of the place of the drawing of the water never saw celebration in his life.
So this tells us about why Sukkot is so joyous, right? We have been forgiven on Yom Kippur, right? At the end of Yom Kippur, we assume that our work has been done with our repentance, that God has forgiven us, and we come in with this clean slate. 5 days later, hopefully we're all still doing good things, right? Haven't done too many new things to need to be forgiven to. I always, when my kids were little, it seemed like coming home from Yom Kippur services, one of them would always hit the other. And I'd be like, really? We were just forgiven. You're already getting started? But that's why you're supposed to go home on Yom Kippur and first thing, start building your sukkah. So the first thing you've done after you've started clean and fresh is to start to do this mitzvah. So you're just in such a place of joy because we've done the hard work of repentance and now we're forgiven. But there was this ceremony that was done in Jerusalem at the time of the temple. So there was water drawing festival. There were jugglers and magicians and people were just doing all sorts of fun things to party. And it was supposed to be the most joyous thing you could ever see. Wish I had seen that. That sounds really cool. All right. As with most holidays, there are different types of meanings. So first we talk about the historical meaning of Sukkot. And we got some of that from the text we read, that it reminds us of the wandering in the desert for 40 years, that they lived in these temporary dwellings. And we were protected during that time, the Torah tells us, by God's glory represented by these clouds. There were these clouds that were protecting us as we go through the desert. You can see a picture here of all the tents and how they might have been encamped. But some of the midrashim, some of the explanations of what was going on with these clouds of glory, it protected us from the heat, so the temperature was good. It protected us from the sand. It washed our clothes. We didn't need new clothes for 40 years. So it was like this amazing protection, and the sukkah kind of represents that protection from God during this time. Then we get the spiritual meaning of Sukkot. So Sukkot, there's this recognition that life is fragile and temporary, and a thankfulness to God, right? Most of the year we're inside of our house, please God. We have heat in the winter, we have air conditioning in the summer, we have electricity. And during this time we come outside and we're less sheltered from the weather, from nature, and we recognize how much God does for us and how fragile life is. And it's a time of thankfulness for the harvest, for the rain. We'll talk more about the rain. What do you guys think? What additional meaning do you think there is in Sukkot this year with all we're facing with the pandemic?
Well, sadly, it's just, and I do mean sadly, it's just exclamation point on everything that you've said. We're living through this, experiencing a time of uncertainty, and you can't see it. You don't know when it's going to end. You don't know who's going to experience it and in what manner, whether it's illness or economic or both, or et cetera. So, yeah.
And there's a tradition on the Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, Aviva, go ahead.
I was just saying, think about, we say thankfulness to God. It's also, being thankful for our family, that, the family that we can have with us in our sukkah, we do have.
Yep. And I think that's a very strong feeling for many of us who are used to having a lot of guests during Sukkot. It's a very different Sukkot this year, right? Just sitting around with our families. And in some ways it can be, for me, my family, the three of us were so sad the first night. We were just sad. It was just the three of us. And by the second night, we had gotten used to it. And I think we were finding the value in being together, the three of us. But I think all of that stuff is true. Yeah, for sure. And the other thing is there's a tradition on the Shabbat during Sukkot to read from the book of Ecclesiastes, Kohelet, which talks about there's a time to live and the time to die. There's a time for war, and there's a time for peace, and there's a time to love, and there's a time to hate. And this kind of temporary nature of things, I think, also is particularly thought-provoking right now. All right. And then, of course, we've got the agricultural aspect of Sukkot, which you feel, especially, I think you're in Israel. It's the end of the harvest. It's a celebration of bounty. What American holiday does that remind you of? Thanksgiving. So the inspiration for the first Thanksgiving, and I don't want to get into the politics of the first Thanksgiving, but the inspiration the Pilgrims had in coming up with Thanksgiving was from the holiday of Sukkot, right? They were very religious Christians. They looked into the Bible. They wanted the idea of a harvest festival, and they came up with Thanksgiving, which is similar to Sukkot. It's also the beginning of the rainy season in Israel, right? We're going from fall to winter at this time of year. And then there's a communal aspect of Sukkot, right? It's a time of coming together. In the time of the temple, the Beit HaMikdash in Jerusalem, was one of 3 holidays where Jews came from all over the Jewish world to Jerusalem to celebrate together. The other 2 are Shavuot and Passover. And it's a time for community celebrations. You see lots of coming together. And we'll get to Shmini Atzeret in a few minutes. All right, any questions about what we're talking about so far before we go into some of the specifics of how to observe Sukkot? Okay. All right, here we go. So a sukkah, I'm in one, right? You look around, this is my sukkah. It's a pretty small one this year because we weren't having guests. It's a temporary house outside, or a temporary dwelling outside. What do you do in the sukkah? You eat in the sukkah. You study in the sukkah. You can sleep in the sukkah. Last night, my husband and my son and I slept in the sukkah. We try and do it once a year. The weather was perfect last night. It was really, really beautiful. And this year I've done something I've never done before, and I've worked every single day out in the sukkah. This is an advantage of working at home. I have felt Sukkot in a way I never have before. It's just been really cool being out here. So a sukkah can be made out of almost anything as long as it's temporary. It has to have 2.5 walls. So my sukkah has 3 walls I've built, and then it's kind of attached to my house. But it could have, 2.5 walls, and the rest could be open, like as doorways, etc. Has to be at least 3 feet high, 26 inches wide, 26 inches long. My middle son is in New Mexico staring at an Airbnb and studying. And he's like, I can't build a sukkah this year. I'm so depressed. And he was sitting in his yard. And I looked over and there was like a pergola sitting there. And I'm like, you can make a sukkah, put sheets around the outside and put some branches on the top and you got a sukkah. His sukkah was big enough for one chair and one person could go in there, make kiddush, say the blessing on sitting in the sukkah and be done. But he had a sukkah. So it can be really small. On the roof is what's called skach, and I'm going to let you see my roof, okay? It needs to be a material that is cut from the ground, like some kind of branches. It could be corn stalks. Mine is bamboo, but it has to be a natural thing. It can't have any food. So if you use, for example, corn husks, you have to take off the corn, which is good practically anyway, because otherwise you get all sorts of animals coming after the corn. It has to be left loose. It cannot be tied down to the roof. And so if you've got a big gust of wind, it's going to blow off and you're going to need to put it back. But again, the sukkah should be temporary. It has to be light enough so the rain can get in. If you have like a metal sheet on your roof, it's not a sukkah. The rain has to be able to get in. There has to be more shade than sun, but you have to be able to see the stars through the skach. So that's the skach. To fulfill the mitzvah of dwelling in the sukkah, you have to eat either bread or cake and cookies or drink wine or grape juice. So this is another really good eating holiday. So you come out, you say the blessing over one of those foods, and then you say a blessing for sitting in the sukkah, and it's lots of fun. We talked about guests. Some people decorate their sukkah. You can see I've got a lot of painting on my walls. Some people hang pictures. Some people hang fruits and vegetables. Some people put posters of chains, like paper chains, anything you want to do. This is, I guess, our version of the Christmas tree. We get to go out, all out decorating. All right, anything I missed about describing a sukkah? Any questions about it? Anything anybody wants to add?
Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
So how do we know, and I don't want to derail us, Sippy, because I know you have a lot to cover, but how do we know this information about the 2.5 walls, 3 feet high, 26 inches wide? I mean, that's so specific.
Yeah, it is. That's a great question. And there's an entire tractate, an entire section of the Talmud that talks about Sukkot. And it goes through all of these laws. It comes from the oral Torah, right? So some people believe that when God gave the written Torah to Moses on Mount Sinai, he also taught him oral tradition that was passed on through generations and eventually was written down in the Mishnah and the Gemara. So it comes from these oral traditions that have been passed down and then written down. And so there is a lot of specific stuff, but on the other hand, there's also, on Sukkot, I feel like in some ways more flexibility than a lot of other holidays. Because like I said, you can make a sukkah out of anything. It could be wood, it could be fabric tarps, it could be plastic, it could be, there are lots of different things you can make it out of. It's not only one thing.
You also could make the base could be either the ground or, as they showed, on trucks or on balconies.
Excellent, right? So actually it's really cool in Israel. A lot of the big apartment buildings, they stagger the balconies so that when you build your sukkah on the balcony, you can still see up to the stars, which is very cool. You can absolutely put it on like a truck bed. So there are a lot of sukkah mobiles, especially I think this year. Different synagogues are driving sukkah mobiles over to people's houses if they can't get out to a sukkah. So there's a lot of flexibility. Roger, go ahead.
It must have at least 2.5 walls. Is it permitted to have 4 solid or full walls and a door?
Absolutely.
So you could not look laterally through it. You can only look upward.
And I'll see if I can show you this. That's actually how our sukkah is. So this is our house. So it's up against a house and that's the door into my house. And then all the other walls, we have solid walls. Sometimes we leave an opening for a door on the outside, but since we weren't having any company, we decided to close it in entirely this year. So like I said, there's a lot of flexibility. All right, any other questions or comments about the sukkah? Okay, so I want to talk about the 4 species, and I've got show and tell here. Even though there's a picture there, I've got show and tell. So we're supposed to take 4 species. So I'm going to start with the etrog, which in English is called a citron. And in the Hebrew, in the Torah, when it describes it, it calls it Pri Eitz Hadar, the fruit of a beautiful tree. So we really, if you didn't know from the Mishnah what it was, if you didn't know from the rabbis, you wouldn't know necessarily what it was. Here is an etrog. It looks a little like a big lemon. It has the most amazing smell that you can imagine. It makes very good jelly or very good liqueur, although I have been told in recent years a number of pesticides they use in an etrog makes it not such a great thing to eat. But there it is. Most etrogim come with a little pitom, like a little nubbin that's like at the top here. Some grow without it, so mine does not have one. So you can't see it here. If that little nubbin gets broken off, then it's not kosher to be used. So you got to take very good care of an etrog. So you can tell mine comes in this like little, foam casing. So that's an etrog. The next thing it tells you to take is the lulav, which is this really big part here, right? This comes from a palm tree, could be a date palm or a coconut palm tree. And you see that it's not opened, right? Palm trees, we usually look at the fronds really big and open. This is all closed together. Then you have the hadass. The hadass is the myrtle, which is these little teeny leaves here. Also smells really, really good. And then finally you have the willow. My willow looks kind of sad. It usually does by the end of Sukkot. It's not all that hardy, but that's these longer ones. That's the willow. And actually the Hebrew and the Torah actually doesn't call it a willow. It talks about a branch that grows near water, near a brook. But the rabbis tell us that that is willow. So you need all 4 of these. If you only have 3 out of 4, if for some reason my willow dies, or I don't have the myrtle, or I don't have the lulav, or I don't have the etrog, I can't fulfill the mitzvah. I need to have all 6 of them. So once I have them, let's see if I can do this right. So I take all 6 of them, okay? I hold the lulav in the right hand, the etrog in the left hand. I hold them touching each other, and then I'm going to shake them in all 6 directions. I should be facing east, but my computer's the wrong way. Take it forward, to the right, to the left, up, down, and behind it. You don't want to shake it too hard because you really don't want to mess up the lulav and break it all apart. And the reason you shake it in all those directions is that you're symbolizing that God is everywhere, that God's presence is everywhere. You can do it anywhere. It's great to do it in a sukkah if you have one, but you can do it anywhere, inside, outside. It's done every day except for Shabbat, and only during daylight hours, right? So you don't do it at night. So this year was really weird because Sukkot started Friday night. You don't wave it at night. You don't wave it on Shabbat. So you didn't wave it all Saturday. So you had to wait till Sunday to wave it. So that was kind of like I'm excited to wave the lulav and I can't yet. All right, questions. We're gonna get into a little more about the symbolism of the lulav and what an etrog and what they each stand for, but any questions about this part with the lulav and etrog? So here's the symbolism. All right, so the lulav, let me get it back again. The lulav is long and straight, and it symbolizes the spine, right? You can see that it's like tall and straight like a spine, but it also has taste, not the lulav itself, but right, the dates that come off the tree. It has taste, but no smell. So they say, the rabbis told us that represents a Jew who knows Torah, but doesn't do many good deeds. Then you've got the etrog, right, which represents the heart. You can kind of imagine how that looks like the heart. And they say that's like a Jew who knows Torah and does good deeds. Then you've got the myrtle, the hadass, which is supposed to look like the eye. Can you see how one of those leaves looks like the eye, kind of eye-shaped? And that represents, because it has smell and no taste, it's like a Jew who doesn't know Torah, but does a lot of good deeds. And finally, you've got the willow, which is supposed to represent the mouth. You can see how that long, thin leaf represents the mouth. And they say that's like a Jew who doesn't know Torah and doesn't do many good deeds. So the interesting thing, one of the things I love most about Sukkot is if any one of these is missing, like I said, you can't do the mitzvah. So it's not just about the super Jew, right? The one who does lots of good deeds and knows Torah and studying and praying all the time. him by himself can't do this mitzvah, or her by himself can't do that mitzvah. You need the one that's doing all the good deeds, but maybe doesn't know Torah so well. You need the Torah scholar who maybe doesn't do so many good deeds. And you even know the person who maybe doesn't do good deeds and doesn't know Torah at all. But they're all part of the Jewish people. And unless you bring them all together, you can't celebrate Sukkot. So it's a really beautiful idea. And you also, because it's your spine and your heart and your eyes and your mouth, that you are taking your whole body to worship God in all directions. And if you're doing it in the sukkah, which is this mitzvah that we're surrounded by, like we're dwelling in the sukkah. The only two mitzvahs I can think of where you're totally surrounded by a mitzvah is the sukkah when you're dwelling here, and a mikvah when we're going into a mikvah with a ritual bath. They totally surround you. So it's actually a very physical holiday, right? There's a lot of uses of your senses in Sukkot. One more thing I read, it was in the Chabad magazine that came out this month that I thought was very cool. It talked about how Sukkot is both a universalist holiday and also a particularist holiday. It said the sukkah is for everybody together, right? Every single Jew is welcome. Every single person is welcome in your sukkah. We're all equal in our sukkah. Nobody's fancy, unfancy. We're all together. And it's more like the melting pot. We all come together. Whereas the lulav and etrog is more like multiculturalism and everybody recognizing each other's differences and celebrating the differences. We all keep our unique elements to us as we come together. All right. Comments, questions about the lulav and etrog? One more thing that's interesting is people sometimes ask, why do we call it doing the mitzvah of shaking the lulav? Why isn't it shaking the willow or shaking the etrog or shaking, why do we talk about the lulav? And the answer I've heard given, although maybe the others, is because the lulav's the biggest thing, it's the most prominent. So when you look at it, the first thing you see is this big lulav. All right. And again, the lulav is for everybody, adults, kids. You don't have to be over bar mitzvah to do it. Men, women, that and dwelling in the sukkah is a mitzvah for everybody, commandment for everybody. All right. We talked about these. Oh, we keep dipping the challah in honey like we did at Rosh Hashanah all the way through the end of Sukkot. And at the end of Sukkot on Shmi Atzeret, which we're still going to talk about, we have a Yizkor service. We have a ceremony where we remember the dead. All right. Any other questions about Sukkot before we go on to Shmi Atzeret? Okay. So we'll talk about Shmi Atzeret and Hoshana Rabbah. We'll talk about all of this. All right. Who would like to read us the short quote from Numbers?
I'll be glad to. I'm Roger Karp. I teach 5th grade at Congregation Shalom. On the 8th day, you shall hold a solemn gathering. You shall not work at your occupations.
Excellent. Okay, so all of a sudden you have this thing saying you should celebrate for one more day on Shmini Atzeret. And it doesn't really say why. It just says it's this solemn gathering and it's a day of rest. A lot of people have never heard of Shmini Atzeret. It is not a really well-known holiday. So let's see if we can find out more about what it is. And Shmini Atzeret literally means the 8th day of assembly, the 8th day of coming together. All right, who would like to read us this one?
I'll read.
Go for it.
I'm Aaron Bergstrom. I'm a 7th grade teacher at Shalom. Then you shall offer a whole burnt offering, 1 bull, 1 ram, Numbers 29:36. The situation is comparable to a king who made a 7-day banquet and invited all the people of the province for the 7 days of the feast. When the 7 days of the feast had passed, he said to his friend, "We have already fulfilled our obligation to the people of the province. Let us, you and me, make do with whatever you find, a pound of meat, fish, or greens."
Okay. So it's this idea that God had this wonderful celebration with us for the holidays. We were together all the way from the beginning of Tishrei, right? We were together for 22 days in all these celebrations. God says, wait, one more day. Celebrate with me one more day. I'm not ready to let you go yet. It always makes me think of when I had my kids were at somebody's house playing, and I'd go to pick them up and they'd say, 5 more minutes, just 5 more minutes. We don't want to go yet. God was so enjoying this time celebrating with us that God wants one more day. So it's this bonus day at the end of the holiday. All right, so on Shmini Atzeret, so God's asked us for this one more day. And it's the first day we begin to pray for rain. I told you that this is the rainy season in Israel. We really should start praying for rain on the first day of Sukkot because that's the beginning of the rainy season. Anybody have a guess why we wait till Shmini Atzeret to pray for rain instead of doing it at the beginning of Sukkot? It's a very practical reason.
Don't want to get wet.
Exactly. We don't want to pray for rain during Sukkot because we got to be outside in the sukkah. So we pray for rain starting on Shmini Atzeret when it's no longer a mitzvah to dwell in the sukkah. There are many people who still have a tradition on Shmini Atzeret to sit in the sukkah, to eat their meals in the sukkah, to enjoy that one last day, but it's no longer a commandment to sit in the sukkah. So that's when we start praying for rain. All right. So, Hoshana Rabbah. Let's just see by a show of hands. How many of you ever heard of Hoshana Rabbah? Okay, we got Aviva and Aaron. Very not well-known holiday, all right? Aviva or Aaron, what do you think of when you think of Hoshana Rabbah?
A repeat, almost of Yom Kippur, when you get one last chance to beat out your sins. You take the willow branches from your lulav and you say certain brachot and you get to beat them until all the leaves are gone.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. All right, so Hoshana Rabbah, interestingly, is not mentioned in the Torah. It's not in there at all, but Shmini Atzeret is, but Hoshana Rabbah isn't. This is a long one. Anybody want to read this for us?
I guess I'm up. I'm
Good.
Moser at the foundation. There was a place below Jerusalem called Moza. They went down there and gathered tall branches of aravot, and then they came and stood them up at the sides of the altar, and their tops were bent over the altar. They then sounded tikiyah, a long blast, a teruah, staccato blast, and again a tikiyah. The shofar blasts were meant to give the ritual great publicity and great authority. They were also a sign of rejoicing. Every day they went round the altar once, saying, "O Lord, save us. O Lord, make us prosper." While circling the altar, the people would recite Psalm 118:25, which is a plea to God to save us and bring us prosperity. Since Sukkot is the holiday in which we pray for the beginning of the rainy season, it is likely that the prosperity which they were praying for was rain. On that day, they went round the altar 7 times. On the 7th day, they would circle the altar 7 times. This is the origins of Hoshana Rabbah, the last day of Sukkot, on which we circle the Torah, which is placed in the middle of the synagogue 7 times.
So this is still done in many synagogues today. Every day of Sukkot, you march around the 7 times around the bima, carrying your lulav. We are asking God to save us and that it should be a good new year. But on the last day, we have these extra prayers that we're praying for forgiveness. So as Aviva said some of this already, right? It's the day before Shmini Atzeret, the last day of Chol HaMoed Sukkot. So this year it's on Friday. And we take the willow branches and we beat them, right? So this is when we're going to take, trying to get it so I can see all of you, but it's not working. Okay. I don't know why. Okay. So you take the willow, which is this one, which is the one that looks like a mouth. You take it out from your lulav and you hit it against the ground. And it's also the official last day of the holiday season starting from Tishrei. It's the last day you can do Tashlich. It's the last day to pray for forgiveness. It's like this mini Yom Kippur. It's the last day we have honey on our challah. It's really bringing the high holiday season to the end. And we're getting ready to start praying for rain. Some Jews will stay up really late studying Torah. And it's one of a few times during the year that we eat kreplach, which is really yummy, which is what that picture on the soup is. It's meat inside of dough, and it's the dough represents God's kindness, and the meat represents God's strength, and so we bring them together. All right. Questions about Hoshana Rabbah? Okay. So that's going to bring us to Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah. All right. Who would like to read us this quote for Shmi Atzeret?
I will. I'm Karen Faust at Ganami Mekwon. On Shemini Atzeret, the last day of Sukkot, we read from Deuteronomy 15. On the second day, we read the end of the Torah to celebrate Simchat Torah. We should note that in Israel, where there is only one day of Shemini Atzeret, it's both Shemini Atzeret and Simchat Torah, we still keep the Babylonian custom of finishing the Torah every year.
So this is a little confusing, but Orthodox and conservative Jews celebrate this year. They will celebrate Shmi Atzeret on Saturday and Simchat Torah on Sunday. Jews in Israel and Reform Jews anywhere celebrate Shmi Atzeret and Simchat Torah at the same time on Saturday. So if you really like to party with the Torah on a normal year when you could go be around people, you could celebrate Simchat Torah twice in Milwaukee, right? You can go to one service, synagogue Friday night and Saturday, and another one Saturday night and Sunday. This year is not so practical for that, but if somebody wants a longer explanation at some point about why it's 1 day versus 2 days, I can give you that, but I think we don't have time for it right now. But you have these two holidays, Shmi Atzeret, this extra day we talked about, the day to pray for rain, and then we have this day celebrating the Torah. Who would like to read this one?
I will.
Great.
The custom is to take out all of the Torah scrolls in the ark, both in the evening service and in the morning service. At night, the custom is that after we circle the platform 7 times with the Torah scrolls, we return the Torah scrolls to the ark and leave 1 Torah scroll out. And 3 men read from it in the section of Zot HaBracha. Custom during the day is to add many readers. And we are also accustomed to call all of the children to the Torah scroll. But it is fitting that an adult recite the blessing over the Torah and that the children listen and fulfill the practice in that way. And we read the section of May the Angel Who Redeems, etc.
So Simchat Torah, first of all, I want to say, is a rabbinic holiday. This is not in the Torah. The Torah doesn't tell us to celebrate Simchat Torah. The rabbis wanted to add this holiday to celebrate Simchat Torah. What other holiday do we have on the Jewish calendar that celebrates the Torah?
Shavuot.
Shavuot, right? Shavuot, which is in the spring, the late early summer, and Simchat Torah. So what's the difference between them? They're both these Torah celebrating holidays. How are they different? So Shavuot celebrates when the Torah was given on Mount Sinai. It's the anniversary of when the Torah was given. And we celebrate it by studying the Torah, right? There's a tradition to stay up all night long studying the Torah. And we reread the 10 Commandments and reenact what it was like to get the Torah. Simchat Torah just literally means the joy of Torah. And it just celebrates the joy we have in having the Torah. So instead of taking the Torah out and studying it, what do? We take it out and we dance with it. It's a very interesting thing to do because the Torah is very precious, both in terms of being very expensive and sacred to us. If you drop the Torah, you have to fast for 40 days. Like, you need to take care of the Torah. Usually we're very careful with it. And on Simchat Torah, we pass it around from hand to hand and everybody dances with it. It's this joy that we have in having the Torah, right? We got this great gift and we celebrate by dancing around with it. The other thing we do is we read the very end of the Torah, and immediately, without a break, we start reading again from the beginning of the Torah. So the cycle of how we read the Torah all over the world, the same Torah portion every week, is starting on Simchat Torah, and we finish Deuteronomy. We start Genesis right away because there's no end. There's no end to Torah study. We study it year after year after year. The Torah portions stay the same, but we change. So what we're going to see in any given Torah portion is going to be different. I think I just said all of this. And I said this too. All right. Any questions about Shmi Atzeret? And then in the last 10 minutes, I have something really fun to share with you. No. Okay, so I've got something fun to share with you. This is the laws of Sukkah according to Dr. Seuss. Not really according to Dr. Seuss. It was written by this Rabbi Arthur Gould, which I added a bunch of pictures to. And it's kind of a Dr. Seuss type of rhyme to tell us all the laws of building a sukkah. But interestingly, it's got footnotes. And I will send you guys this presentation afterwards so you can take a look at it. You can build it very tall. You can build it very small, or you can build it very tall. Okay? So this is what we were looking at before about the minimum and the maximum size. You can build a sukkah that's 20 amot, right? So that's like 25 feet, 5 feet tall. So you can build a really big sukkah. You can build it on a barge. I can't read all of this, hold on. Sorry. You can build it very large. You can build it on a barge. You can build it on a ship or on a roof, but please don't slip. Okay. You can build it in an alley. You shouldn't build it in a valley. And the reason you can't build it in a valley, interestingly enough, is because you have to have more shade than sun, but the sun still has to be getting through. And the shade in the sukkah has to be coming from the skach on the roof, the stuff on the roof, not from the mountains that you're next to. So that's what the valley is about. You can build it on a wagon. You can build it on a dragon. So there's a whole discussion in the Torah about whether or not you can build sorry, it's from Rambam. If you can build a sukkah on a camel, and you can, but you can't ride it on Shabbat. So, but this is like the sukkah mobile we talked about earlier. You can make the schach, that's stuff on the roof, of wood. Would you? Could you? Yes, you should. Make the schach from leaves of tree. You shouldn't bend it at the knee. So that's a really interesting thing the Talmud discusses. You can't build a sukkah under a tree and say, oh, the leaves on the tree, that's my schach, right? Again, the shade has to come from the schach, and the schach has to be already cut from the tree. It can't be still attached. Build your sukkah tall or short. No sukkah is built in the temple court. You can build it somewhat soon. You cannot build it in the month of June, right? The sukkah can't be a permanent structure left up all year round, or you build 6 months before. There are some ways that you can have some of it ready year round, right? There's some people who have some scaffolding year round, but you have to do something new to it within 30 days of Sukkot. If your sukkah is well made, you'll have the right amount of shade, right? As we said, more shade than sun. You can build it very wide. You cannot build it on its side. Build it if your name is Jim or Bob or Sam or even Tim. Build it if your name is Sue. Do you build it? Yes, you do. From the sukkah you can roam, but you should treat it as your home, right? You eat, you drink, you sleep, you read, you play games, you work, everything in the sukkah. You can invite some special guests. Do not stay in it if there are pests. You can sleep upon some rugs. Don't you build it where if there are bugs. So it's supposed to be a pleasant place to be. So the rabbi said this whole discussion is when do you leave the sukkah? If it's raining so hard that it spoils the soup, then you can go inside. Likewise, if the bugs are really bothering you, there's something in the weather, if it's hailing, you go inside. If in the sukkah it would rain, to stay there would be such a pain. And if it should be very cold, stay there only if you're very bold. I will say that said, there are some Jews who will not eat a morsel of food or take a sip of even water without being in the sukkah. So I've actually been at rabbis' houses for Sukkot dinners and gotten very wet. Make a sukkah one and all. Make it large or make it small. Sukkah rules are short and snappy. Enjoy Sukkot. Rejoice. Be happy. And that's the end. All right. So, I got through all that with 8 minutes left. I'm very, very proud of us. So that leaves time. Are there any questions we didn't get to? Questions, comments, etc.? Nothing. I'm going to ask a favor of my Ganami teachers in both the Ganami classrooms. I can't really see who all is there. Can you just put me a note in your chat, so I know you're there, and I send you the presentation, and I make sure to give you credit, because I wouldn't want to not give you credit. Just put me a little chat, okay? All right. Well, then I wish everyone. Oh, I didn't tell you this. There's a tradition during these in-between days of Sukkot to tell people Moadim l'simcha, which means these intermediate holidays, they should be joyous. And here's the big thing that people in the know this. So when you say to somebody Moadim l'simcha, the response is Chagim uzmanim l'sason, which means that the holidays and these special times have been given to us specifically for joy. So we're going to try this. I'm going to say Moadim l'simcha, and you're going to say Chagim uzmanim l'sason. Let's try it. Moadim l'simcha.
Oh, people are on mute.
Yay. I got to tell you, I've said Moadim l'simcha to, I don't know, 50 or 100 people during the holiday, and I think like 2 have said back to me, Chagim uzmanim l'sason. So it's not really so well known, but it's kind of a fun thing. All right, so thank you so much all for coming and sharing Sukkot with me. I hope that these last days are very, very joyous and that you find a way to celebrate. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Sippy.
Thanks,
You're
Sippy.
welcome.
Thank you so much. Always great to learn with you and the others.
No
Thank you,
problem.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Thank
Happy New
you.
Year.